The First Million Words, episode lucky number 13, World Building with Rachel Aaron. I've been going for
They're not like bad. They're just very super.
Oh, nice. Well, we get mosquitoes, but
not as cuddly.
Yeah, not as cuddly as caterpillars. So speaking of world building, you say have you been doing that? Do you take a laptop out with you, or just a notebook, and just kind of jot down ideas while you're on the outside?
I actually have several stages. Generally speaking, I actually go over this a bit in my How I Plot Novels, but I'll do the basics here because that gets really, really, really detailed. I thrive on lists and details. I'm a pretty detail-oriented person. But, generally speaking, what I do is I'll get an idea for a book. You know, you get this awesome idea, and it's like the best idea you've ever had, and you're just dying to write a book about it.
Oh, yeah.
And, well, I try not to run after those too hard because I have derailed myself horribly from the things I'm supposed to do, chasing after this idea. So what I do is I have a thing. This is funny. I have a Google document called Idea Bucket.
Oh yeah.
And I'll just put sort of thing about the idea and put it in my idea bucket. And generally speaking, when I'm ready to write, because I have I have deadlines and schedules and that kind of thing, and I actually have like the novels I'm going to write for the rest of the year planned out in advance. But generally speaking, I'll have an idea for a novel, and I'll say, I'm going to write this novel, and it's going to be about this. And it will often involve several ideas that I've been very excited about in the past. Mm-hmm. Like, I wanted to write a novel about a post-apocalyptic world with child soldiers, so I'll pull all that out. And I also want this magical system, so I'll get that down. And so what I do is when I've got sort of this idea for the book in my head, I'll get my notebook, and I'll go outside or I'll go to the coffee shop. I'll just go wherever. And I'll just sort of write down what I know. I'll write down what I already know about the novel. Like who's going to be in it, what it's going to be about, plot, the world, the feel of the book. Feel of the book is something I think is very important. The book's voice. Yeah. Is this going to be a funny book? Is it going to be a serious book? What kind of a book am I writing? Sort of really kind of get... Yeah, I actually...
That's nothing I ever even consider when I'm starting a story, is thinking of what the voice is going to be.
I don't know if maybe I'm one of the only people who does it, because a lot of people I know don't do it. But I always try to. I talk about how every one of my books has a flavor in the mind. I think of it as like a flavor. It has a taste.
Yeah.
It's really kind of weird, but when I'm writing the book, I get a certain feeling, and so every book I start, I say, what is the feeling of this book? What am I trying to evoke? Is this going to be a sad novel? Like I actually just finished a novel that's with my agent right now for a new series that hasn't sold, but it's again very different from either my sci-fi series or my Eli books. And it is a book about deep longing and this girl who has been horribly stepped on by life and by her very cruel master. And that book has the most heart-wrenching feeling to it. And right from the beginning, I knew this was the feeling the book should have. And everything from that moment, all the plotting, all the world building, reflect this feeling of what I knew the book was going to be about. Like, there aren't really any funny scenes in the book because it's not a funny book. It's a very, quite frankly, very sad book. And, I think that figuring out sort of the feel of the book and what you want the book to be at the beginning, like the earlier you figure it out, the more cohesive your whole will be when you finish. It's like if you know it's going to be a lemon cake right from the beginning and you plot all your ingredients to somehow like complement or involve lemons, you don't get anything that's weird or sticking out. Because sometimes I'll read these books that are very good, but they'll have this like a character who doesn't belong, or they'll have these weird slapstick moments. It's like, why is that in this book? It doesn't belong. So, but again, that's just my preference. Generally speaking, at the beginning of world building, because world building, I think, is the most fun part of a novel. It's the time when you get to be pure creation. And my only real rule of thumb is always make sure I'm interested. Because if you're bored with your world building, that's kind of a bad sign.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're bored right from the get-go.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. That's
terrible.
That's like my favorite thing is like, I'm going to write up a 4,000-year history for this world, and I'm not ever going to even use it.
Yeah, and like never got published. Was a very enormous epic fantasy, and it was like 220,000 words. That book was huge.
Yeah.
Very, very rightly never got published. It was kind of a bad book. Way too long, way too big. But right after I finished it, I started world building on a new book since that one didn't sell. And it was going to be another giant epic fantasy. And I world built because I'd read all this stuff, right, about how, you should know your world better than your reader and all this stuff. So I thought, and I'd read about how Tolkien made a language for his books, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to do all of that. And I sat down, I wrote out this giant history and, table manners for long dead empires. And, ridiculous stuff. And after about 4 or 5 days of this, I was so sick of that world. I hated it. I never wanted to, I didn't even want to touch it. And I just threw down my pen. I was like, I'm done. I'm never doing this again. And so you can seriously overworld build, but don't do that.
Yeah.
Have fun. This should be fun. If you're not having fun, something is wrong.
Yeah, I could never. I have told myself that I am never going to try to invent a language.
I don't think anyone should unless they are a linguist.
Yeah.
Unless you actually love language for its own sake. Seriously, don't do it. Go find Swahili and steal stuff from that.
Yeah. Well, actually, I mean, I am like that though. I do love language and linguistics and everything like that, but
you like it like a friend.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's not a
I keep it in the friend zone. It's like I don't want to have to learn how to conjugate verbs in a language that I made up. Because I know I would end up adding that to the book is somebody who speaks that language giving a language lesson to somebody who doesn't. And I think that's probably one of the most boring things you could put in a book.
Yeah, I would totally say this about world building. World building should serve the plot and the characters. The plot and the characters should never serve the world. The worst is when you're in a book that's pretty good, and then suddenly we just take a sightseeing detour to talk about history. Yeah. And sometimes, I take that back. China Mayville can make it work. China Mayville, but I've never met anyone else who could make it work. And it's one thing if that history actually becomes very important. If you're looking up at the statue of the supposedly dead hero that you're going to run into later. That's different. That's a plot twist. That's a plot hook. But when you're just looking at architecture that doesn't really do anything for the story, that is not perhaps the best use of your words.
Yeah.
Although I will add a caveat to this. If you ever read any Sarah Monet, she wrote the Melusine series. And very dark books. I would totally recommend reading the synopsis pre-try one. But they are some of my books in terms of just language. And also in terms of place. Her city of Melusine, I could read travelogues about that place forever. It is the most interesting city. And she does do the sightseeing thing. They walk through places and they talk about the history. But the history is so cool. It's like walking the book. The city is almost a character.
Ooh, I like that.
So, yeah, it's so amazing. And this is, of course, another rule of writing, is that for every rule of writing, there's who's broken it and has done it amazingly.
Yeah.
So you can really do anything if you can pull it off. But I would highly suggest against forcing your world building into your story just because you did it.
Yeah.
Basically, if that makes sense.
I guess if your beta readers say, hey, can I know the history of this character and why this religious practice is dead, then you could probably put it in. Yeah.
One of my rules of thumb actually is I have a from Eli, so I guess I stole it from myself, which is my stones have a 2-bird minimum. And everything I do in my novel has to do at least two things. There has to be at least two things that every scene does.
Mm-hmm.
And everything I mention has to be for at least two reasons. And this is not really a rule, just something I kind of struck toward because I think it adds depth.
Mm-hmm.
And it also makes me think critically about my decisions to include things in my novel. And because that is one of the things that you kind of need to think about. Why are you putting something in? And it's not really enough to just say because it's cool.
Yeah.
It has to actually have a purpose and a meaning being there. Otherwise, why have a plot? Why not write a bunch of cool stuff all in a row? And there are people who've done that
Mm-hmm.
and have made it work, but that's not the kind of writer I want to be. So
Yeah.
it's something I try to keep in mind.
Yeah, it's like, why make up your own, weird herd animal if you could just use sheep?
Yeah. And sometimes there's a good reason, but you have to make sure there is one.
Oh, yeah.
You're not just doing it.
How close do you pay attention to, like, flora and fauna type stuff when you're world building?
It really depends on the characters.
Mm-hmm.
If I have characters who care about that,
Mm-hmm.
then I pay a great deal of attention. If I have characters who are never going to notice it, then I don't really pay attention. I mostly use it for basically window dressing.
Yeah.
Like, I'll have them land on a planet, and I'll talk about the amazingly beautiful spindly trees that are thousands of feet high or something.
Yeah.
Well, I guess hundreds of feet high. Thousands of feet high is a little high.
Yeah.
But hundreds of feet high, right? Mm-hmm. But that's all I'll ever mention about them. And so I don't go into, like, the life cycle of this tree that I mentioned once. I just say, this is what it looks like. Because it's a movie. You're setting the scenery.
Yeah, I like that for
actual important stuff.
Yeah, I like that for when somebody's, like, coming to a new planet. But if you're, writing something where, your characters have been in this place forever, it's like you don't have to say, oh, yeah, he walked through the blue grass and, just to make it different. Yeah.
Well, far better is, say, for example, you do have blue grass and you have a character. You can mention the blue grass to give information about your character, like talk about how your character hates this stupid blue grass of the memory he had of when he was on his knees in the blue grass after the murder of his father. So now he sees the blue grass and it fills him with that memory he's repressed, so he tries to never look at it. Now you have mentioned the blue grass and learned a great deal about your character.
Nice. Yeah, I like that. That's the world building serving the plot and the characters, yeah.
Because that's what this book is about. Your book is about your plot and your characters. Your world is your setting, and it should serve the story.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
And that's actually another thing that Sarah Monet talks about. I love Sarah Monet. I think she's brilliant. She's the lady who wrote Melusine. But she talks about there's a difference between plot and story, and they're not the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
The plot is the sequence of events, and you have plot twists, which are things you didn't see coming and that kind of thing. But a plot is always, they go here, they do this. Like the plot of the Hobbit is wizard picks up Hobbit and dwarf goes on adventure.
Yeah.
But the story of the Hobbit is the story of Bilbo Baggins becoming a hero, or at least becoming less of a scaredy hobbit.
Yeah.
Is a story of an ordinary person doing extraordinary things. And that's the difference between plot and story. And so when I think about my novels, I try to do everything in service to the story, which means you have to know what story you're telling, which isn't quite as easy as it seems. Yeah, for example, the story of Eli Mompress is really the story of a clever man running from things that he does not want to face, and how far can he run before life hits him hard. Mm-hmm. How far can he push it? And also, it's the story of a man who did not want to get attached, and yet finds himself involved in these very deep and meaningful friendships. And so the plot of Eli Mompress is, they steal a king, and they have adventures and all this kind of stuff. But the real story of the Eli books, is Eli himself becoming a better person. And also the story of Miranda having to run up against the wall she's drawn, the line she's drawn in the sand,
Mm-hmm.
mixing my metaphors. But this is the story, and this is really what you got to this is what I think about in world building,
Mm-hmm.
to bring it all back around.
Yeah.
This is what I think about in world building, is I ask myself, what story am I telling? What is the story that the plot and the characters and the world are all serving?
I think that's a good way also to know that once you've gone too far. is like, yeah, okay, this is getting out of hand because it has nothing to do with the story. So,
Yeah.
I think.
Although I will recommend that never, if you want to keep going on world building, totally keep going until you think you have enough story. But once you have enough, you've got to stop world building. I ran into a woman at a convention once who'd been world building her cycle of 12 novels for 20 years.
Wow.
And I'm like, well, have you written a novel yet? And she's like, oh, no, I'm not ready. And I'm like, you're going to be dead before you're ready. Go write that novel.
Yeah, that's kind of, going back to Tolkien, that was almost the same with him, with like the 20 years thing. And he, but of course that was with, building the language and everything. But,
yeah. And it's also important to remember for Tolkien is that, he had a job. He had a career that he was very happy in.
Yeah.
And his fantasy novels are really a hobby for him, and he was doing them to have fun. If you're just writing to have fun, then quite frankly, it never matters if you finish a novel or not. And that's the difference between, I think, people who want to be professionals, who want to be writers as their career, and people who are doing it for fun and doing it as a hobby, which is not at all to downplay Tolkien, because, I mean, what he did for a hobby, most of us would give our right arms to be able to do for our career. He was he was a true talent, and he also was doing something no one else had done at that time. And now, of course, Tolkien is like traditional fantasy, which I think is kind of a silly concept. But, the dwarves and the elves and all that stuff, it seems almost pat. But at the time, it was really revolutionary, and that's why it's so famous. And that's pretty important to remember, is that there's never going to be another Tolkien. There's never going to be another Tolkien, because he was himself. And you could never really seek to be another China Miéville or another Ceremonet or another Tolkien or another, even another Robert Jordan. Yeah. You always, this industry we're in, basically fantasy storytelling is continually changing. And the most important part of being a writer is to write the stories that you find interesting and try to tell your own story and try to make something new and fun and cool that stands on its own merit, and never worry about, are you ripping someone off, or is this, oh my God, is this even going to work? It's all in the service of the story.
Yeah.
So just tell your story and don't worry about that other stuff.
Yeah, just all about getting it done.
Yeah. It's all about writing that book that you want to write. Because if you set out to try and be another Anne McCaffrey, all you'll be is another Anne McCaffrey clone.
Yeah.
So, just do your own thing.
Nice. So, Guillermo, did you have anything? I kind of took over there. Did you have anything you wanted to add or ask?
Oh no, I was just listening, and I'm sitting here taking notes because I'm like, trying to get the word counts up, and I'm like, how much world building is too much world building? Because with what I'm writing right now, it's like, I sort of took the sword and sorcery genre, and just kind of put it sort of in a pretty much a modern day setting. Like, it's still a different world. It's not it's not the United States. It's a completely different universe altogether. But everything's pretty much like this. So it's I've been trying to wrap my mind around that. What would they have? What would they not have? What would be the dynamics between the races?
Can they say dude?
Yeah. Well, they say dude a lot, actually.
Okay.
But yeah, it's it's good to know that there's just do the world building that you actually need, and don't go crazy with it, or otherwise you're just never going to move on from that world building. I don't want to. Yeah. I certainly don't want to do that.
Exactly, and I also want to stress is a lot of people ask me, how much is too much world? How much world building is too much? Like, they're looking for, like, well, you do 40 hours of world building, and at 41st hour you cross the line.
Yeah, stop at 21 pages.
It's totally not like that. So much of writing is, sadly, intuition. It's just knowing. And the more you write, the better your intuition is. Because writing is a skill. It's something that you practice and you get better at and you learn new things about. Like, I'm such a better writer now than I was when I first started writing. And I'm such a better writer now than I was when I sold Eli. And this is actually something that kind of drives me a little nuts, is these people who get really, really depressed because they don't sell their first novel.
Yeah.
And I can understand getting depressed, because, I mean, you spend so much time on that novel. You're really invested in it. You finished it.
Mhm.
You know, you've done this huge accomplishment. A lot of times you've worked maybe a year on the thing, and then it doesn't sell.
Yeah.
And these people get super depressed and stop writing. And I'm like, what is wrong with you? You want to be a writer, right? You wouldn't, like, say that a painter is terrible because he never sold his first painting. Writers hold themselves to a ridiculous standard. It's your first novel. Of course it's not going to be perfection.
Yeah.
Some people sell and some people don't. And, like, I didn't sell my first novel, so I wrote another novel, and that one sold. Lynn Vigil, who writes Paperback Writer Blog, who I read, and I read that a lot when I was first getting started, you know, she wrote, I think, 10 novels before she sold her first novel, and now she's a New York Times bestseller.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's utterly ridiculous to think that you have somehow failed, or you are somehow not worthy of being a writer, or your dream is over because you didn't sell your first novel or finish your first novel. No one can say that dream is except you, you know. And the idea that just because New York didn't come banging down your door the moment you wrote the end somehow says something about your writing is just absurd and ridiculous.
Yeah, and there's, I mean, like, who was it? Oh, Brandon Sanderson and Michael J. Sullivan wrote like 13 books before they got published.
Yeah, I mean, it's every time you ask a writer, you go to, like, especially writers who look overnight successes, and you ask them, how many books have you written? The answer is always a lot.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of practice to be a good writer. It's not some, and of course there are a few people who just wake up and say, oh, I'm going to write a book, and then write a New York Times bestseller, cough Stephanie Myers. But, you know, those people are, like, flukes. They are statistical anomalies, and you should never look at them as the way things actually are. They are the result typical of Diet Pill commercial, you know?
Yeah, they're just the ones that are very, like, famous, and so that's what people think.
Exactly.
So, that noise that you hear in the background is indeed my washing machine, or the washing machine, as it's colloquially known where I grew up and around the Midwest. And yes, Guillermo is not here, and I'm only half here. I'm sick. This is Ben, by the way. Thanks for listening to this episode of the First Million Words podcast. And yeah, Guillermo is having a little issue with work. So am I, and we just haven't had a time to get together and record. Hang on, let me turn off the washing machine. Hold on. Alright, that's better. So, we have not had the chance to record, so I apologize for the lateness of this episode. But, here it is. We thank Rachel Aaron very much for being a part of our show for this month. It's been a lot of fun, and we've gotten a lot of new listeners this month, and I'm very happy for that. It makes me happy to get the last couple of reviews we've had on iTunes were very positive, and comments on our website, fmwpodcast.com, have also been positive, and I thank you very much for those. So I'm just going to make this quick, because I'm not very good at just talking into a microphone unless I have other people to talk to. Plus I'm sick, as you can probably hear in my voice. So I just wanted to say thank you so much to everybody out there who's listening to the show. Every time it gets downloaded, you know, a little number ticks off on our end, and adds to the amount of times it's been downloaded on our little stats page, which is very nice. And every time that number goes up, it makes me extremely happy, makes me smile. Okay. All right, I'm good. I don't know how some podcasters do this, where they are a single host of a show and talk. And I just don't know. I'm not the kind of person that just talks into the air and says stuff. As you can tell, I'm not very good at it. Other people out there are. If you listen to I Should Be Writing, You know that Lafferty is very good at it. I always mess up her name, by the way. Always mess up everybody's name. So again, thanks to also, not just the people listening to the show, but the people that have been on the show and their pets for being awesome animals. So thanks to everybody out there. I'm going to wrap it up now and just say I've been playing a lot of Batman Arkham City because I'm a stupid completionist, and I just love seeing that 100% at the end of video games, and I'm nearly done with that. So that's been my writing week, as I've been doing that. And also, I have recently taken up yoga, which totally kicked my ass the other day, the first time I did it. I'm sore all over, and if you don't know, I am a very large man, for those of you who don't know. Guillermo and I are both large bearded men, and so I've been doing this weight loss yoga thing that's basically just using my own body weight against me. Lifting my own body weight in awkward, weird positions. Doing that, I'm the kind of person that after I work out, well, first off, I'm the kind of person that doesn't want to work out in the first place. So it really takes something to get me working out. So this whole thing has really helped me with my writing as well. Because after I work out, I'm very energized and I want to do something. And I've been focusing that lately into writing. So I'll do like an hour of ass-kicking yoga. And then I'll do like a couple hours of ass-kicking words. And if you listen to last week's episode with Rachel Aaron, we talked about how to boost your word count, which was a great episode. I loved it a lot. And also big props to the Dead Robot Society, because they did that episode before we did. So you can go over there and listen to their show too. They're a lot of fun. I've been talking to their host Justin on Facebook a lot lately. He's a cool guy. He's a cool guy. And they have a fun podcast. It's that, and I Should Be Writing, I mentioned. Adventures in Sci-Fi Publishing is a good one. Although I haven't heard much new stuff from them, so I'm kind of jonesing for it. But Writing Excuses, of course, you probably already know about that one. The Creative Pen, Penn, Creative Pen, that's a very good one. What else am I missing? These are other people that I wanted to thank, because without them, I would not have had their original ideas to rip off to do this show. And also, thanks to Guillermo for being my co-host. And my brother-in-law, my best friend, my hetero life mate. So wherever you are, Guillermo. Actually, you're probably sleeping right now, because he's been doing a lot of kind of 12-hour overnight shifts. So so I'm going to go take some vitamin C and some NyQuil, and I'm going to pass out for the next 7 centuries, and I should be fine. So next week we'll probably have another episode going up pretty soon, and then this whole releasing an episode on Friday is probably going to change, and I think we're going to switch it to Mondays. This is a Wednesday that this is going up, so it's a little late, and again, I apologize, but next week, the next episode should be probably in